Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They tried to fence off my private pond, called it community stewardship, claimed I was being selfish for wanting peace on my own land. What started with a polite smile ended in a courtroom, a drone, and a frog named Judge Ribbit. You won't believe how far this HOA went. I've never been a man who craved attention. Give me a quiet evening, the sound of cicadas, a cold beer, and the still surface of my pond, and I'm whole. My name's Trevor Nash, 41 years old, and I live a few miles out of town on a 25-acre piece of land that's been in my family since my father bought it back in the late 70s. No HOA, no nosy neighbors, just trees, birds, and the freedom to walk around in flannel pajama pants at noon without anyone raising an eyebrow. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. The real jewel of the property, though, is the pond. Nestled along the western edge of my land, just beyond the apple grove and a gentle downward slope lined with pines, sits the old pond. It's not massive, maybe an acre or two across, but it's deep, clean, and surrounded by dense trees that shield it from everything else. My father and I stocked it with bass and catfish when I was a kid. Over the years, I built a small dock, a fire pit, and a swing between two oaks. On summer evenings, it's where I'd take my niece to catch frogs. In the fall, it reflects the fire-red leaves like a mirror. That pond is sacred to me. It's more than water and dirt. It's memory therapy legacy. On the far side of the tree line past the pond, across a shallow ravine and a thick patch of woods, lies Silver Pines, one of those upscale gated communities with perfect hedges and mailbox regulations. I rarely thought about the place. They were over there. I was over here. We had our invisible line in the earth and life moved on just fine. That is, until she moved in. Her name was Elaine Foster, though she quickly became known, at least in my head, as Karen-in-Chief. Late 40s, polished to the hilt, always with her phone in one hand and a mission in the other. Turns out, she had just been elected president of the HOA of Silver Pines, and she carried that title like it was a military rank. I first met her when I was raking leaves near the end of my driveway. She pulled up in a spotless white SUV, rolled down her window, and introduced herself with a smile that somehow made my neck tense. Said she was just getting to know the neighbors and had heard about the beautiful pond on the edge of my land. I remember blinking, caught off guard. No one from Silver Pines had ever come down here before. She went on about how her HOA was interested in enhancing the natural connectivity of the neighborhood and how your pond would be such a blessing for the community. I didn't even know what that meant at first. Then she said it, casually, like offering a cup of sugar. Have you ever considered allowing scheduled access to the pond? Nothing invasive, just small group visits, yoga by the water, maybe a nature walk for the kids. I laughed, not maliciously, just genuinely. Then I said no, politely but firmly. It's private property, ma'am. The pond's been in my family since I was a boy. I like it the way it is. She tilted her head, smiled wider. Of course, it's just such a beautiful space. It seems selfish to keep it locked away when others could enjoy it too. That was our first conversation, and when she finally drove off, waving with a weirdly rehearsed elegance, I stood at the edge of my driveway for a long minute, trying to shake the feeling she wasn't done with me yet. I should have trusted that instinct. It was the metallic clang that woke me, not birdsong, not my alarm, not the usual creaking of the old rafters in the house. No, this was different, sharp, industrial, out of place. For a split second, I thought I was dreaming. Then came the grinding, like steel teeth chewing into the earth. I shot up in bed, heart racing, still wrapped in the fog of sleep, but something in my gut told me, trouble. I stumbled to the window, rubbing my eyes, and immediately noticed it, the reflection of flashing yellow hazard lights down near the tree line. That wasn't right. That was my land. I threw on boots, no socks, and an old hoodie, grabbed the first set of keys I could find, and jumped into my truck. The gravel spun under the tires as I tore down the slope toward the pond. Morning mist still hung low over the ground, the sun just barely painting the sky in orange, but what I saw cut through the haze like a lightning bolt. There were workers, about 5 of them, hard hats, tool belts. One guy had a post driver. Another was unloading metal fencing panels from the back of a flatbed, right by my pond. But the real punch in the gut? The sign. Silver Pines Protected Natural Zone. Access restricted. HOA permit required. I didn't even park. I slammed the truck into park halfway off the road and stormed out, my boots squelching in the wet grass. "Hey!" I roared, louder than I meant to. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" They looked up like I'd just broken the fourth wall of their sitcom. Nervous glances. Someone muttered, "Is that the guy?" No one answered me directly. And then, as if conjured by the devil herself, she appeared. Elaine Foster, pristine white sneakers, leggings with a leaf pattern, and, of course, her ever-present digital tablet, which she was using to direct the operation like she was running a NASA launch. "Mr. Nash," she said brightly, as if this were a surprise garden brunch. "So glad you're here. It'll be easier to explain everything in person." "Explain what?" I growled, my fists clenching. "You're trespassing on private land. You're building a damn fence on my property." She waved a hand casually, like she was swatting away a fly. "Let's not be dramatic. It's a temporary structure for the safety of the community while we finalize the recognition process." I blinked. "Recognition process?" She turned her tablet around like she was showing off a family recipe. "We've submitted a petition to the county to designate this pond area as an environmentally significant feature. Once approved, it will fall under joint community stewardship." My jaw nearly hit the gravel. "You're telling me you're trying to take my pond, fence it, assign it a schedule, and you didn't think you needed my permission first?" Elaine smiled, and I swear the temperature dropped a degree. "Trevor, it's not about taking, it's about sharing. The community needs natural spaces. You have so much, and Silver Pines has so little. We're simply being proactive." One of the workers was halfway through drilling a post into the earth near the dock. My father's dock. I felt something hot and ancient rise in my chest. "Get off my land," I said low and deadly. "Now." Elaine didn't flinch. "We're well within our rights to temporarily secure the area pending administrative review. If you interfere, it could be construed as obstruction." I stepped closer. "And if I call the sheriff and have you arrested for trespassing?" She gave me a look that could have curdled milk. "You could, but that might complicate your standing in the upcoming community development hearings. We wouldn't want that." There it was. The threat, not just physical, bureaucratic. The HOA's ultimate weapon, paperwork, permits, and process. I stared at her, heart pounding, the sound of that post driver echoing in my skull like a war drum. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was war. I turned on my heel and marched back to the truck. My hand shook as I dialed 911. Then I called my lawyer, then a land surveyor, and then, because I knew this wasn't going away quietly, I launched the drone. If they wanted to play games with my land, I'd give them something they couldn't redact, couldn't reframe, couldn't deny. Evidence. Every inch, every coordinate, every trespasser in high def. Because this wasn't about community space. This was about my peace being fenced off without a fight. And I don't lose fights on my own land. The police arrived 20 minutes after my call. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, gravel crunching under tires. I was already waiting by the gate, arms crossed, drone hovering silently overhead like a digital hawk. The workers had slowed down but hadn't stopped, acting like they were just installing lawn decorations instead of committing blatant trespass. The lead officer stepped out. Name tag read Sergeant. Morgan, a guy probably a few years older than me with the kind of face that's seen every flavor of suburban drama. He was calm, respectful, but I could tell he wasn't thrilled about being called in before 7 a.m. Still, when he saw the sign marked Silver Pines HOA Zone planted next to my dock, he raised both eyebrows. "This all on your land, sir?" he asked. "Every square inch," I replied, handing him a folder, copies of my property deed, county records, and drone shots with GPS overlays. "And here's the kicker. This pond's about 120 yards inside my boundary. No ambiguity, no shared edge." They had to pass through trees and cross a slope to get here. Elaine, of course, marched right up with her clipboard and her well-practiced HOA smile. "Sergeant Morgan, I appreciate you coming. This is simply a misunderstanding. The Silver Pines HOA has submitted an administrative request to classify this area as a protected green zone. We've received legal consultation supporting a temporary preservation order," I cut in, "which isn't approved, or legal, or real." Morgan held up a hand. "Ma'am, do you have any documentation granting you the right to enter or modify this property?" Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly. It's pending review. The process is already underway. Pending, the officer repeated. But not approved. Well, no, but then I'm going to have to ask your team to cease all activity immediately. Her mouth opened, then shut again with a barely audible click. The workers looked at her, uncertain. One of them started reloading the fence panels into the truck, but Elaine wasn't done. By noon that day, the HOA had sent a letter to the county zoning board claiming my land was historically ambiguous in usage and should be evaluated for public access compatibility. I almost laughed until I read the part where they accused me of blocking critical green space development that could benefit underprivileged community members. Underprivileged? Silver Pines had 2 golf courses, for God's sake. Still, I wasn't taking chances. I hired an independent land surveyor, a no-nonsense woman named Kendra, who had a laptop full of satellite overlays and an attitude that could cut sheetrock. She spent 3 hours walking the perimeter with high-grade GPS equipment. Her verdict was clear. There's no gray zone here. Your pond's like a donut hole surrounded by your land. HOA would need a teleportation pad to claim access. I laughed, for the first time in days, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity was finally documented by a third party. But that didn't stop them. That evening, as I sat on my porch sipping a drink, a neighbor from the edge of Silver Pines, an older guy named Artie, walked over sheepishly, said there'd been a special HOA meeting where Elaine allegedly whipped out a slideshow titled The Ethical Reclamation of Natural Space. I nearly choked on my drink. She was rallying her HOA troops, making speeches, talking about community stewardship and the moral obligation to resist monopolized natural resources. In plain terms, they were plotting to take my pond again. The fence might be down, but the war was only beginning. And I had a feeling next time they wouldn't be bringing just posts and drills. They'd be bringing lawyers. By the end of that week, my peaceful life had turned into a legal chessboard. The fence may have been taken down, but the damage had been done, physically, emotionally, and financially. My dock had been scratched by the drilling equipment. Several feet of the embankment near the waterline were ripped apart, and the place where my father and I used to sit with a couple of lawn chairs and a tackle box, flattened under tire tracks and boot prints. That's when I realized I wasn't just angry. I was done. I called Barbara Reed, a local property rights attorney with a reputation so sharp, even real estate developers whispered her name. She had the calm demeanor of a librarian, but the courtroom precision of a scalpel. After one look at my documentation, photos, drone footage, GPS logs, Kendra's survey results, her lips curled into something between a smile and a war cry. Oh, Trevor, we're going to make an example out of them. We filed a formal civil suit against Silver Pines HOA for illegal trespass, unauthorized construction, property damage, emotional distress, and an injunction to prevent further encroachment. But that wasn't all. Barbara's strategy wasn't just legal, it was public. She told me something I'll never forget. HOAs operate in the shadows of neighborhood politics. Let's shine a floodlight. So I did. I posted a video on social media. Nothing fancy, just me standing by the pond with the torn earth behind me and the HOA's old sign still leaning crookedly in the mud. This is my pond, my private property. Last week, an HOA I don't belong to fenced it off without permission, claimed it for their community, and called me selfish for objecting. This isn't just about a fence, it's about property rights, and I'm not backing down. The video went viral. 2.4 million views in 3 days. Local news stations picked it up. One reporter called me the Pond Patriot. A Reddit thread titled HOA Tries to Colonize a Pond exploded with memes, satellite maps, and someone photoshopped me as a medieval knight defending a watery castle. But even better, the attention brought in help. A law professor reached out to offer expert testimony. A group of small property owners banded together and started a GoFundMe to support the legal battle. Strangers mailed me support letters, including one lady from Ohio who sent homemade jerky and wrote, "Stay strong, Trevor, we got your 6." Meanwhile, the Silver Pines HOA tried to contain the fire. Elaine released a bland press statement calling the situation a misunderstanding and accused me of media manipulation. That only made things worse. The next day, someone edited her quote into a TikTok where she morphed into a Disney villain while I stood stoically beside the pond with a fishing rod and an eagle screeching in the background. But humor aside, this wasn't a joke. They messed with the wrong man. And now I was bringing the storm. The courthouse was an old red brick monolith in the center of the county seat. Inside, the air was too cold, the wood too polished, and the silence too heavy. But as I stepped through those double doors, files tucked under my arm, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who had ever been bullied by some power-tripping HOA, every homeowner whose boundary line was treated like a suggestion instead of the law. The judge, an older woman with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, presided with piercing eyes and an iron gavel. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, even some off-duty sheriff's deputies I recognized from the fencing incident. Apparently, the Pond War, as the local news called it, had become the hottest show in town. Elaine Foster sat at the defendant's table, flanked by two sharp-suited lawyers who looked more like failed game show hosts than legal professionals. She wore a deep green blazer, no doubt chosen to symbolize her eco-conscious leadership, but it couldn't mask the tightness in her jaw or the way she kept wringing her hands when she thought no one was looking. Barbara started strong. She didn't need theatrics, just facts. She presented every document, the survey maps, deed history, drone footage with timestamps, photos of the unauthorized fence construction, and even the HOA's internal emails that we'd obtained through discovery, including one where Elaine wrote, "Nisig Summings. If we move quickly enough, he won't have time to react." The courtroom went silent. Then came the kicker. Our land surveyor, Kendra, took the stand. She laid out with absolute precision that my pond was well within my property by more than 100 feet. The judge narrowed her eyes at Elaine's team. "Would you like to contest the survey's validity?" One of the lawyers cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor." Elaine stiffened, her jaw working like she was chewing nails. Then it was my turn. I stood, hands steady. I told them about the morning I found strangers fencing in my memories, about my father who built that dock with his own hands, about the countless hours spent watching the sun dip below the tree line with a rod in one hand and peace in the other, and then how it all was nearly stolen, not by thieves in the night, but by paperwork and posturing disguised as neighborly concern. This wasn't just a fence, I said, voice even. It was an invasion. When it came time for Elaine to testify, something cracked. She took the stand composed, but under cross-examination, the mask slipped. When Barbara asked if she believed she had the right to seize property without consent, Elaine flinched. Her voice trembled. I believed it was best for the community," she said. "And what gave you the authority to act on that belief?" Elaine paused, her hands clenched in her lap. For the first time, she didn't answer immediately. "Because no one ever questions the HOA," she whispered. Silence. The courtroom hung on those words like they were carved in stone. The judge leaned forward. "Well, Ms. Foster, consider this your first objection." And with that, she ruled. The HOA was ordered to pay $185,000 in damages, remove all unauthorized structures, and issue a formal public apology. Elaine Foster was personally fined and suspended from her role as HOA president for no less than 18 months, pending further review by the county. Elaine sat frozen, her mouth opened, then shut, her eyes glossed over. The confident queen of the cul-de-sac reduced to a flickering candle in the storm. She turned slowly toward the gallery, perhaps expecting someone, anyone, to defend her. No one moved. As I walked out of that courtroom, the late afternoon sun warming my shoulders, I heard one of the reporters mutter behind me, "The man defended a pond and buried an empire." Damn right I did. There's something poetic about the smell of smoked brisket wafting over the same patch of grass where a war was once waged. Just weeks after the courtroom gavel came down like thunder, I hosted a good old-fashioned Southern-style BBQ right by the pond, but I'll get to that. First, let's talk about the fallout. Elaine Foster disappeared from Silver Pines like a bad headline scrubbed from the internet. One week, she was marching through HOA board meetings with binders and big ideas. The next, her perfectly pruned bushes were overgrown, and a discreet "for sale" sign sprouted on her front lawn like a weed she couldn't stop. Word was she'd resigned from all HOA positions for personal reflection, but I heard she moved 2 counties over to a gated community with no HOA. Oh, the irony. As for her co-conspirators, those who voted yes on the temporary stewardship plan, sent letters to the zoning board, and tried to fundraise for a community dock, they weren't spared either. 3 resigned from the HOA board after a heated emergency meeting. 1 got booed at a town hall. Another was caught trying to distance himself by claiming, "I thought the pond was on common land," even though he'd signed the letterhead calling me an obstacle to civic development. Turns out, no one wants to be remembered as the person who tried to annex a pond. But the best part? The new interim HOA president, Tom Delaney, retired firefighter, no-nonsense attitude, invited me for coffee, said he was deeply sorry, and promised that under his leadership, Silver Pines would stick to their lawns and keep out of the woods. And that brings us back to the BBQ. I put up flyers, community picnic, pondside, free food, good music, HOA drama optional. Dozens came, not just my friends, but folks from town, even a few brave souls from Silver Pines who wanted to extend a peace offering. The guy who once emailed the zoning board to reconsider Nash's land use. He brought potato salad and an apology. We grilled ribs, smoked brisket, and played bluegrass covers of 80s rock. Someone brought homemade cider. Kids chased frogs, adults swapped stories, and no one mentioned bylaws, committees, or restricted access zones. And just above the dock, I hung a new wooden sign carved by hand. Private pond, open hearts, HOA free since forever. That day, as the sun set behind the trees and laughter echoed over the water, I realized something. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a celebration for everyone who'd ever been told to just follow the rules when the rules were broken from the start. And the brisket, divine revenge, slow-cooked and served with extra sauce. A year passed, but the memory of that courtroom showdown still rippled through the county like a well-thrown stone. I couldn't go into town without someone clapping me on the back, offering me a cup of coffee on the house, or jokingly asking if I had any other natural landmarks to liberate. Apparently, I was now the pond guy. And you know what? I didn't mind. Silver Pines underwent a transformation of its own. The new HOA leadership, headed by Tom Delaney and a few level-headed residents, stripped down the bloated bylaws, added a community garden, and ditched most of the micromanaging nonsense. No more turf police or mailbox paint compliance committees. Heck, they even let a guy park a kayak in his front yard. Big progress. But the moment that truly tied a bow on it all, I got an invite. Hand-delivered, printed on recycled paper with wildflower seeds embedded in it, very on brand for the new regime. Trevor, we'd be honored if you'd attend our first HOA Community BBQ Pondside Edition. No fences, no drama, just neighbors. P.S. Bring the smoker. I laughed out loud. Of course I said yes. When I arrived, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the HOA of old. There were picnic tables decorated with gingham cloth, kids painting birdhouses, and a big "Thank You Trevor" banner stretched between 2 trees. People I'd once squared off against were now offering me deviled eggs and asking about base bait. It felt oddly wholesome. The highlight, midway through the event, little Lucy Delaney, Tom's granddaughter, ran up to the edge of the pond and pointed, shrieking with glee. "Look, there's a big frog!" Sure enough, perched proudly on my dock like it owned the place, was a massive, moss-colored bullfrog. It croaked once, deep and loud, like it was making some kind of royal announcement. The crowd cheered. Someone tossed it a chunk of watermelon. It didn't flinch. "Guess even the wildlife knows this pond is worth defending," Tom chuckled beside me, handing me a plate stacked with ribs. We named the frog Judge Ribbit. Fitting, I think. As dusk settled and fireflies began their quiet flicker dance, I looked out over the water, now clear of fences, full of life, and brimming with stories. The war was over. The lesson had landed. Boundaries were respected, neighbors humbled, and somehow, in the chaos, something better had grown from it. A frog croaked again behind me. I raised my beer in salute. To peace, to ponds, and to never underestimating a man with land, a smoker, and a little bit of patience. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should be.